There you go. Heard this recording. So I'll just officially start it and get going. So hello, everyone. My name is James Williams, Director of Programs with the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. You join me from another hotel room in another country, and lots of travel at the moment. Last week was Dublin, the week before was India, and today is Croatia. So I'm getting around a lot. And a very warm welcome to our content and advertising meeting. Usually this would be hosted by Ross Flynn, who is co-leading the group with Narayan, you see here. But Ross is on a well-earned holiday, so therefore it's up to myself to take things forward. And the group today has a guest speaker in the form of Eduardo, who is the CEO and founder of a company called Optics. And before we get to Eduardo, if I can just share my screen, I have done that. So make sure we are in the right place, and it is the right date. That it most certainly is. And for everyone here, I know we've got Chris, great to see you from Mesh Ads, and Sergey as well, new members. Both of you are not new to MEF, but Eduardo, you've never come to anything MEF. This is working group, and this is limited to MEF members only. No one from the outside world can come into this live. No one from the outside world, unless they're a MEF member, can see the recording of this as well. We have many different working groups. We've got about, actually it's 11 working groups now across 6 main different product verticals, if you want to call them that. We call them ecosystems. And this is one of the ecosystems, content and advertising. We've got messaging. We've got personal data and identity, IoT, wholesale, and that's about it, really. So that's the 6, personal data and identity as well. And content and advertising really puts together practically, if you take IoT out of the situation a little bit, then it practically puts together all the other ecosystems, because within content and advertising, of course, messaging plays a role. You've got to verify the identity of your client. The client, of course, wants to know if you are contacting them for whatever reason, wanting to send them content or dealing with a payment, then their identity is super important. So 2-factor authentication comes in there. And of course, none of this would be possible without a network in play. And all our working groups have this antitrust policy in play, which means very, very simply, people cannot collude to price fix and manipulate the market in any way. And this is where MEF comes in. We run a number of other closed-door meetings for mobile operators in specific countries. For example, I run a monthly meeting for the operators in Sweden. We also run a big program for all the operators in the US, linked to the 10-digit long code messaging program. So we're very much there as a neutral player and observer as well, just making sure everything is rolling fine. So first up, content and advertising team is myself. We have Ross, who's on holiday. Eva is the administrative lead. Eva in the UK, she manages all the memberships for our now nearly 210 members and all the finances, so very, very important. And we have Narayan on the call. Narayan, would like to introduce yourself as well, because quite a few of the people here won't have come across you before.
Sure. Sure. Thanks, James. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, depending from which part of the world you're joining, right? I'm Narayan Jai Singh. I'm Chief Business Officer with a mobile ad tech company called VServe in India. We are a data-driven mobile marketing company. It's been a pleasure working with James, Ross, and Eva. We've been putting up every month this program, and where people can come and learn, share. Happy to get your feedback. The participants, you want to share something, you're expecting something from us in the next program, do drop in an email to either one of us, and happy to pick it up. And want to thank Eduardo for taking out time for this session. Looking forward to learn a lot about Optics and what it has to offer. So over to you, James. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Narayan. So I was with Narayan over in Mumbai in India a couple of weeks ago, where we're hosting a big event over there. And here we are. So this is the working group. The mission is to become the industry voice and how to better serve customers through personalization whilst protecting consumer trust in the digital era. So we have that there. Am I hearing myself echoing? Was that something else I'm hearing?
That might have been me. Sorry, James.
No problem. Okay, I just thought it could be an echo. You never know. And our guest speaker, as Narayan and myself have just said, is Eduardo from Optics, an ad fraud detection and prevention solution for leading digital advertisers. We've got Eduardo here, and I'll let Eduardo take it away very, very soon. But what I will say is what this group until now, until actually today, has not talked about is ad fraud, because ad fraud is such a huge area. Within MEF, so many members constantly talk about fraud in direct carrier billing. We have a direct carrier billing group, and fraud and consumer protection is a big discussion point there. We have so many groups linked to messaging fraud, whether that fraud be SMS or voice or any other messaging channels you can think of. It could be WhatsApp, it could be RBM2, but ad fraud is far, far bigger and far more impactful globally in terms of money lost and customer dissatisfaction creation. And I think today is the time where we actually open the door to talking about ad fraud within this group and how MEF members can work together to try and limit it as far as possible. It's a tough gig and there's a lot to do. So Eduardo, I'm just going to come off the share. If you have a presentation, great. If you don't, no problem at all. The forum is yours to go for it. We have 49 minutes. You can take as much of it as you want, as little, and feel free here, people, to ask questions. We've got lots of various types of companies in here, and certainly we have far more people actually listening to the recording as well from lots of types. So let's open the door to ad fraud and let's get this big issue into this group, starting with Eduardo. Go for it.
Great. Thanks a lot, James. Thanks for the proposal on being here today. Also, Beatrice, and nice to meet you, Narayan. Hi to the rest of you. I see some familiar names on the attendee list. For those that I don't know personally, pleasure to meet you. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely perfect. No problem.
Right. So let me share screen today. I've pulled together some slides. The idea for today is to provide a high-level view into what ad fraud is and what ad fraud actually entails for all of you in the telecom, DCB, VAS industry in general, right? So let me very quickly share screen here. Can you see my screen?
Sorry, Edward, just to mention in your audience today, you've got British Telecom, a mobile operator. You've got Catherine from British Telecom. You've got Louise Ford, who manages Impello, who is on the payments protection side of things. So I'm sure there's quite a bit of overlap here. Hi, Louise, as well as likes of Chris and Sergey, who are on the Google Ads side of things. So we've got Surinder here from .go, who are on the RCS RBM side. You've got Melissa from Aegis Mobile, who do a lot of the verifications of companies in the US for the 10-digit long code program. So you've got lots. Actually, there may not be a huge number of people, but we have every area in the industry covered with the attendees, which is nice. Yeah.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. Good to hear. Sorry, James, you were saying?
That's it. I was just introducing that the people here, just saying we've got all the very good players here. We've got authenticators, we've got payment security, we've got mobile operators. Everyone is covered. Actually, all areas are covered by the attendees. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. That's great. That's great to hear. We have a good roundtable today. So as we were saying, we will dig a bit deeper into what ad fraud is and how it impacts your industry. As I've pulled this together just to provide a high-level view, I'd be more than happy to, whenever there are any questions or any doubts, I'd rather make this a dialogue. So feel free to chip in, ask any questions, share some experience, and I'm happy to build a dialogue here today with you all. So maybe before we start from the audience today, I wanted to see who has heard of or who has experienced, which would be actually the more interesting part of the question, who has experienced ad fraud recently. I'm not sure if raising hands is available here in Zoom, or if I can get some sort of interaction or live chat.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got the chat function, or everyone feel free to speak if you can, folks, as well. The answer is absolutely, I've heard of it. But you know what? I don't know if I've experienced it, because I actually don't know if I've experienced it at all. So on the messaging side of things, 100%, 100%. But ad fraud, I don't know. Louise, what about you? Because you're coming from the payments protection side of things, and just out of interest as well, how much overlap? Well, there is going to be a lot of overlap with ad fraud there as well, isn't there? I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. Our monitoring program does look for ad fraud. So yeah, misleading campaigns. So yeah, there is some overlap, and yeah, we're looking for it every day.
So has anybody actually experienced it and been negatively impacted it? Have you felt, anyone felt it? It's a funny one, because I don't know. Because unless you've signed up for something and you ended up signing up for something that you didn't intend to, so something was meant to one-off and you found yourself signing up for something where you would billed every day for, and et cetera, I don't. No,
so actually, this is...
Yes.
Have you been impacted?
Absolutely, James. So it was the wave one of COVID, April 2020, when it was new for everyone, the lockdown concept, and nobody knew what to do. There were a couple of restaurants nearby from my house. I suddenly saw ads about them on Facebook that, book a meal here and we'll deliver it in 24 hours, book in advance. And he was just charging in US dollars terms, 2 cents as booking amount, right? And he said that in 24 hours, when the product is delivered, you can pay the remaining. I thought maybe, okay, some solution for the COVID or something like that.
So literally just 1 rupee or 2 rupees or something, and that's it.
10 rupees.
Oh,
so
sorry,
which
10
is
rupees.
like,
wow,
yes.
okay.
Yeah. So, okay, how much is 10 rupees? So $1 is about 80. So 10 cents, sorry, I'm sorry, 10, 11 cents. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. So I went ahead and booked that meal, and I got a fraudulent call from a guy saying, hey, you know what, our payments are not integrated. Let me send you an payment link, and let me send you an app, download that app. And why don't you enter your credit card number? I understood that there is something fishy about this. And politely I told the guy, yeah, sure. I quickly went ahead and deleted his app, deleted everything that he had sent me, right? Blocked his number. Yeah. And I'm like, and then I read on social media that a lot of these restaurants were doing fraud. They were just putting some random ads. People were entering Google form, because what clicked me is on Facebook, when you respond to a lead or an ad, it opens up a Facebook lead form, not a Google sheet.
Oh,
right?
Okay. I'm not aware. I don't have Facebook, so I don't know. Yeah.
So that's what it struck me, that it should open a Facebook lead form. Why is it opening a Google sheet? Something is not right, because I'm going outside the platform, right?
Yeah.
And boom, then I read articles on articles that people were putting fraudulent ads about fraudulent products and going berserk. And I even came to know that some of these ads were not even placed in India. They were placed outside, So I completely understand where Eduardo is coming from, ad fraud, and I personally
had you paid at that point? You'd paid that 10 rupees or not?
No. So what happened is, to pay that 10 rupees, he told me that I have your number. I'm sending you a payment link. I'm sending you download that app. I'm like, why should I download an app to pay him? So so that's what it. My 6 cents kicked in, and I'm like, okay, there is something fishy about this arrangement,
Yeah.
And then there was a big article, in fact, on Netflix, on the Indian version of Netflix. There is a proper documentary on ad fraud and fraudulent calls coming from some random villages. They've siphoned off millions and millions of US dollars from people's account.
Wow. So they've made a whole village has made it an industry. They've got to go literally.
Right.
Yeah.
And in that village, it's just barely about 30, 40 people where
Yeah.
they get hold of SIM cards and,
Yeah.
you know, they use VPN or they use satellite calls to reach out to you. So when you call and say the number does not exist. So there's a proper documentary on Netflix for this.
And if you weren't aware of this at all, if you weren't aware of this, and I know lots of people actually had real difficulty getting hold of food in the lockdown. It's okay, government's saying you can't do this, you can't do that, but hello, how am I supposed to eat? So, and that's what that was preying on, literally.
Yes,
yeah.
And digital ad fraud is even more gruesome because what happens is you're seeing a digital ad, you don't even know the person behind it. You go about responding to the lead, you go about responding to the ad, putting up your lead form, right? Some people are pretty innocent. They go ahead, enter some of their banking details or credit card details, only to know that a copy of that is being made somewhere else, you know?
I think that's a very interesting case, Narayan, because ad fraud, it takes many shapes. And in many cases, it's actually composed of different mechanisms that include social engineering, which includes misleading copies, which includes the misuse of domains, and of course the use of invalid traffic to generate all of those interactions. And that's something that it takes so many shapes that it's in many ways hard to understand what's happening, hard to actually measure it and how to prevent it, because it's simply all over, right? And today we will actually be taking a specific approach or a specific experience, which is especially in the detection of invalid traffic causing ad fraud, which is one of the, let's say, most harmful subsets of ad fraud, which is also what impacts, of course, subscription fraud in indirect carrier billing, so fake subscriptions in VAS.
Absolutely.
And I think Narayan, yours is a great example of how different vehicles, different techniques, they actually come together into one to basically, in the end, it's defrauding somebody, obtaining a payment that shouldn't have been made, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, just one last point to add to that, Eduardo, and something informative for you, James. In India, there is a proper cyber cell. So if you've been cheated online or you've been cheated with some fraudulent payment mechanism, you can walk into the nearest police station, visit the cyber desk, put in a complaint with all details, they verify. The banking regulator, it's called Reserve Bank of India. They've put a regulation, they've come heavily on banking institutions that upgrade your systems, make sure the innocent customers are not cheated digitally, right? Not to mention, India is surrounded by some notorious countries. So we do get calls from those notorious countries trying to act with the Indian accent, you know, and changing the number, the CLI of the phone, and giving you a 91 CLI, right? And so the banking regulator has come heavy on your app installations, on your app updates, on the payments, on the authentications. It's crazy. So there's a proper cyber cell division. There's a proper cyber crime law governance that is there, you know, but still there is some extent of fraud that is going on, but I won't take much of Eduardo's time. Let him continue, but it's interesting.
It's good. So in India, actually in every police station, you've got a cyber desk. Wow. That shows the extent of the problem. Yeah. Yeah. We definitely don't have that in the UK. Yeah. Yeah.
We see one of the issues with fraud in general is that it lacks governance, it lacks regulation globally, and this happens in ad fraud as well. It happens also in subscription fraud. But the fact that actors are global, whereas cases appear locally, that's a huge thing, because that means that perpetrators of fraud will see a bit more I think later.
So. And something else that comes up, and sorry about interrupting again, but it cuts across so many working groups in MEF, and I keep saying it at panel discussions as well, is the whole domain name industry, with particularly, again, you've got lots of parcel delivery companies. I was actually visiting a couple of MEF members today, and I was talking about this exact issue. And here in Croatia, they have that exact issue with DHL, and we have that in the UK as well, where everyone, well, not everyone, but lots of bad actors are trying to impersonate DHL, saying you need to pay an extra €2 to get your package delivered, blah, blah, blah. That's massive, absolutely massive. So that impersonation, enterprise impersonation thing, but so much of it is driven also by the URLs that people have. And there is zero regulation in the world of domain names. And I do not understand. So Narayan can rock up to GoDaddy, buy 2,000 domain names, which are vaguely linked, look like DHL in somehow, and would not be questioned. I don't know why I've picked on you, Narayan. Usually I pick on myself for the example, but of a fraudster. But why would Narayan do this? What legitimate reason has he got to buy 2,000 domain names, which kind of look like a well-known brand? Why isn't anyone monitoring that? Why isn't anyone stopping it? Why aren't regulators even mentioning it? They're not even mentioning it. I've heard no one mention that at all, yet they're all over voice in the US. They're all over SMS now with the FCC, but domain names, which are the vehicle for so much of this fraud because of the brand names elicit that trust, no one talks about. Zero regulation, nothing. I'd never understood that.
I think that's a very good point, James. And part of that has to do that there's there's lack of, as you were saying, of a regulator around domain control and in general advertising practices. There are some, of course, national governance bodies that happens. As Narayan was saying, in different fields of fraud prevention, there's a lack of unified fight, let's say.
Yeah.
But super interesting, Narayan. And so today, my idea was explaining just a bit of context. I'm the CEO at Optics, and we provide invalid traffic detection and fraud prevention for DCB and VAS players. Okay, and I don't want to pester you with details on Optics, but basically we help DCB players prevent two things. One is fake traffic, so that is ad fraud, which is what we will be seeing today, and then also help prevent fake subscriptions, which is how invalid traffic actually converts let's say a user into a fake subscription, right? So we'll be tackling today, let's say, the more advertising part of that, which is the fake traffic. And the idea here is that that advertisers, and in this case, we are thinking of companies that are putting money as to advertise their products. So we're thinking mostly B2C or large B2B companies as well. They are putting in money to advertise, acquire new customers. Unfortunately, in that process, a part of that budget is actually being captured by fraudsters. So maybe just a conceptual approach that I wanted to take with you today is, okay, what is invalid traffic? What is ad fraud? What does each of those things mean? So first of all, we have paid traffic, right? Paid traffic is anything that we are an advertiser is investing in PPC, so search, display, also affiliation, programmatic. Very typically in VAS and DCB, we see a lot of investment in affiliation, and that's the key driver of subscriptions. We'll see a bit more why later. And then we have that a part of that traffic actually is invalid. And why it's invalid, it's because it's using several mechanisms. And here we see a few on the right, such as bots, adware, click farms, etc., to basically generate this fake traffic. And what happens in the end is that this fake traffic has been designed to perform a few things only, which is to perpetrate ad fraud. And ad fraud can come in multiple shapes. Can come in the shape of fake views whenever we are advertising. Imagine we are a large telecommunication company, we're advertising nationally, even internationally, to potential new subscribers, and we are doing viewability-based advertising or performance-based advertising. Perpetrators will try to steal away a significant percentage of that advertising spend through fake views, fake clicks, fake leads, and even fake attribution. And of course,
adware, so bots, I understand. Click farms, yep. Gosh, I've seen videos about that, unbelievable. But adware, that's obviously ad software that we're talking about.
Yeah.
There's that malicious software downloaded, which is meant to
Correct.
generate.
Correct.
Yeah.
So by adware here, we mean anything that gets installed on a mobile device and that basically performs any of these actions on a semi-automatic or automatic fashion without, in all of those cases, without the user actually knowing, and draining resources away from the actual performance of the device, and of course draining budget away from the advertiser. Correct. And that is one of the most sophisticated ways because it requires more large-scale operations, but it does happen very, very often, especially in indirect advertising.
Thank you.
So we were mentioning cyber crimes before, right? And we see that ad fraud. We see here on the left different types of cyber crimes where we see bank fraud, we see identity theft, which was mentioned before, also payment fraud. What is actually very, very revealing is the fact that ad fraud is very, very easy to put in place. So there's very little effort, very little risk. We can do, fraudsters can do it from anywhere in the world, and the potential payout is huge, right? So easy to do, very large reward. So this is a field for fraudsters basically, and it does have a huge cost. It has a huge cost in the form of those fake clicks, fake impressions, fake attributions being driven and eating away the advertising budget. This, by the way, is a study from Hewlett-Packard, which I really likes to put into perspective. Already, all of these different cyber crimes are relevant enough by themselves. So when we stack them up and we actually see that ad fraud is top right corner, that puts into very clear perspective.
I think there's a link though with organized crime, because what's happened in the world of messaging, I know, it's got very sophisticated cyber criminals have moved into messaging because there's so much extra messaging, particularly for two-factor authentications, because they're more online payments, because of essentially the impact of the COVID restrictions. That's been the layover and hangover, more transactions. It's essentially, in plain language, digital transformation has been accelerated a number of years because of the reactions to COVID. And there's more payments online, which links to more messaging. So therefore, messaging and advertising and digital ads worth hundreds of billions a year, whereas application business to consumer SMS is worth 50, 60 billion. So it's anything like that, whether it's 50 or 60 or 500 billion, very sophisticated criminals are going to be there. So, yeah. Exactly.
That's precise, James. And what we see is we actually are aware of, globally, we have seen very well-known ad fraud cases, a couple here. The most recent one here on the right was actually, sorry, James?
Well, I'm so sorry, I just went, wow, I read that. 2/3 of, it's basically 100 million ad spend wasted. Yeah,
exactly. So this was Uber, this was 2017. So Uber, as one of the largest, probably the largest brand in transportation. So they were investing a lot on advertising, trying to get real users to actually install their app, right? So basically, they were incentivizing their partners, their media agencies, their publishers based on the number of installs that they could get. So the number of people that would get their apps installed on real devices. Thing is, fraudsters managed to find a way to actually fake the number of installs, so that up to 2/3 of those 150 million that were spent that year were actually useless. So they were actually fake installations that came from virtual install farms elsewhere. I don't remember precisely in which region this was. Right, but this is just a very famous example. Of course, this becomes famous because it's a large brand. Truth is, it happens to every single advertiser, be it a vast merchant, be it a large telecom operator, being an automotive brand, right? So, and then here on the right, we also see the perspective from an actual advertising platform, such as Twitter, which makes a percentage of profit from advertising. There was, in the recent takeover by Elon Musk and his new team, there was a lot of controversy over the potential of Twitter to actually generate significant ad revenue. And that had to do with the presence of bot accounts and automated accounts. And of course, you know, bot accounts, automated accounts, they do engage and click, and they generate activity. The only thing is that that activity is actually fake activity, and it's not sustainable on the long term, and definitely not sustainable ethically.
I think I've even heard of enterprises, and I never heard of this until I heard about it in the messaging fraud and revenue assurance group a few months ago, where there are enterprises who are generating this fake data, fake customers, fake data within their own enterprises, because they can then sell that customer data to third parties who will pay for it. So that it's just fake data. So there is money literally in customer data, and it's fake. So some enterprises are engaging in that actively. So that's something new I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, that's something that happens also a lot in everything that has to do with lead generation practices. So all companies engaging in lead gen, as opposed to an immediate transaction, they are subject to lead fraud as well, right? And many of these leads, they could be invented, or they could be what's the right word in English? Counterfeited from some black market where the data has been, you know, stolen, and that even poses an even increased risk, as you were saying, James, because data, either it's invented, so you are actually creating a malpractice, or it's being stolen. So yeah, even a greater risk for those involved. I'm not sure so far if anybody from the working group has some comments or questions.
No, not at the moment, other than me.
Hi, Eduardo. This is Catherine McGuire from EEBT, and I work on richer messaging there. I just wanted to say this was very interesting, just in terms of contrast to how messaging fraud operates. So really worthwhile session. Thank you.
Sorry, could you repeat, Catherine?
Yeah, sorry. I said I've been looking quite a lot at, and within our team at BT, we've been looking quite a lot alongside MEF at messaging fraud, and a lot of the brands that we work with seem to think that messaging has a lot of fraud, and you know, these kind of channels are really safe. So it's a really interesting perspective for us, and worthwhile session.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the comment. What type of messaging would you do?
We're mainly, well, we look at SMS, but richer messaging channels as well. So our RBM, WhatsApp for Business, on some sides of the business, just everything you would expect.
Is there any overlap also into social channels? Like social media?
Not very, very tiny amount actually, but really I meant from when we're speaking to things like financial service brands, and they use a lot of, or you know, just customer protection, if they use a lot of social media ad spend for marketing, it's interesting to show that there's a fraud element to that as well that they need to be aware of. So that's this has been an interesting session in that regard.
There's a bit on that in a slide later, where we see the percentage of invalid traffic generated by type of channel, and there's a bit on paid social as well. So that might interest you.
That's great. Thank you.
Surinder, you've come on. Are you about to say something, or you just switched on your camera?
Yeah, I think just wanted to make think there's a question about, you know, cross between messaging channels and ads. I think there is a growing trend where there are click to chat ads being, you know, made available both by Facebook and Google. So that's going to be an interesting you know, play out there, where you'll have ads that will lead to, you know, messaging, you know, Facebook ads could lead to, you know, clicked into a WhatsApp chat, etc. So,
And then dare I say it, bots and plus AI together. Wow, what a combination. So yeah, just fake, utterly fake chats. Yeah.
I think that's interesting, because that would be an evolution from probably what in a few years will be a bit obsolete, which is the typical lead, and may transform more into conversation that you're mentioning. So advertising will transform to a conversation, like what you're suggesting, Surinder. Great, thanks for the comments, both of you. And basically what Adfraud does is impacts the advertising metrics, and basically CAC, return on advertising spend, the conversion rates. And this is something we see in telecom and VAS repeatedly. But
so sorry, CAC, is that customer acquisition count? I don't know. There's a guess.
Yeah, correct. The cost of acquisition of a customer.
Oh wow. Okay, that was a guess, but there we are. Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes in the industry it's called CPA as well.
Oh right, yeah.
So
that's what I'm more familiar with. Yeah.
So it's basically inflating. It's inflating or actually making negative the key acquisition metrics of businesses, right? Because it's basically creating fake figures above what should be a real human acquisition, right? So it's basically inflating, making it very difficult for companies to achieve their acquisition metrics. And how we typically see we get a lot of questions on how that actually happens. And here we have an advertising value chain, which is an advertiser who is the one who puts in the money, and this usually goes into ad networks, and then it goes into publishers, right? Who are the ones who are advertising the ad. In the case of social media are the publishers themselves, or in some cases of indirect advertising, like affiliation or programmatic or display, there are third-party publishers, and then there's the ad network, right? So the traffic flows left, whereas the money flows right. So publishers and ad networks are meant to bring traffic, understood as impressions, clicks, leads, installs, subscriptions to the advertisers, whereas the money flows right, which is of course the value chain, a normal value chain that you would expect. The issue is that this creates some perverse incentives as well, because the more traffic you can generate for those advertisers, basically automatically you're getting in more money. So unless these ad networks are very, very well prepared, and those advertisers are very, very well prepared, this is bound to collapse at some stage, right? We also get a lot who is behind ad fraud, right? Who would be interested in that? Of course, people that make money out of this. So typically we see fraudulent publishers, we see fraudulent intermediaries within the ad tech value chain, and in some cases we also see competing adversaries who could, be trying to orchestrate some campaign to actually eat away a large portion of the advertising budget, right? And here we see, and you were mentioning, James, organized crime before. The structure that we see from the people that make ad fraud varies a lot, but it goes from single black hat marketers that know quite a bit of advertising and domain and analytics, so as to become publishers and send in fake traffic to those advertisers. But we also see very large organizations in what we consider organized crime. So that reminds me of your previous comment in the other slide, James.
Okay.
So, and then again, these actors are spread all over. They are not in specific geos. We do see some very strong index of exposure, or actually of origin of fake traffic in Europe and in the US, because there's a lot of data centers there. Also in Southeast Asia, we see a lot in Central Africa, in East Europe. So it's quite well spread all over, and this makes it a difficult thing to control, just the same way that subscription fraud in DCB is a relevant thing. So just a couple examples here of invalid traffic and how it gets generated. Here we see on the left a click farm. This is a lady that I'm not sure precisely where this picture was taken, but this is how fraudsters would, in this case, very elementarily generate fake clicks. But this lady's objective is to click on as many ads as we can see here, right? So they will go row by row, click on those ads, and then starting all over again. The devices will be generating once and again, will be generating impressions so that the people working in those click farms can actually generate those clicks. And this happens with clicks, happens with impressions, happens with leads, installs. This is just an example of what could be behind the Uber case that we saw, for instance. And then here on the right, of course, an example of code, very simple code that actually generates a click bot that starts to click, in this case, on a series of ad placements. And of course, and you were mentioning before AI, the issue with AI is that it's making this code on the right easier and easier to generate. So you can actually trick ChatGPT, and we've done it ourselves to test how easy it was for fraudsters to do it. You can actually get ChatGPT to generate a code to generate fake clicks on very different platforms. So it's basically making ad fraud, click fraud, subscription fraud more and more accessible to basically anybody with bad intentions.
I think that could make for a very, very interesting meth webinar, AI, good or bad, because everything we're hearing so far, or everything I'm hearing, this is my personal opinion for what I'm seeing, it's not so positive at the moment, to put it that way. And indeed, some countries have gone so far, like in Italy several weeks ago, banned ChatGPT fully. And when Elon Musk, his only one-on-one meeting with the US president, that was the topic, AI. That's that he chose that topic. So it's a massive issue. Yeah.
So one question, have you seen or have you guys explored using AI to detect patterns, whether this could be fraudulent? Because that's the other part of it. You know, one is
good.
that
Use it as a
AI
force for
being
good.
used to generate fraud, but how to detect that this looks like a fraudulent pattern? So
we particularly use machine learning as a way to detect. So basically, there are two main ways to do fraud detection and prevention. There's what we call a human-first approach, which is based on rules-based detection. So we know that if this happens, then this is fraud. And this is very certain, very accurate, but it lacks scalability because it means that anything that is new needs to be assessed humanly, by a human, right? There's the other approach, which is by machine learning. And this approach has exactly the opposite pros and cons. It's very scalable, but on the other hand, it actually is less explainable because machines, they're good at understanding whether something is fraud or not, but they're not good at telling you why precisely that's the case, right? So in our case, we do a combination of both to actually detect and fight advertising and subscription fraud. Okay, thanks. And then one on channels. So what we have here is we get a lot of questions on okay, how does invalid traffic and ad fraud actually impact different of channels that I'm using, that we're currently using, that we're using to acquire new customers? Well, it actually affects every single channel simply at different rates. Right, of course, affiliation, which we see here in blue, that's a very relevant driver of ad fraud. Here we have two subdivisions, one which is direct affiliation, which is much lower, and then indirect affiliation here, which drives a significant proportion. But what is funny is many marketing leaders, they tended to think in the past that search engine marketing on the main platforms is free of fraud, free of click fraud, and that advertising in those platforms is for free. That is, in our experience, far from the case where we see in SEM, in search engine marketing, or in paid social, we see invalid traffic of around 4%. Of course, with a large enough budget, that's a very, very substantial budget that is being lost monthly, right? And then maybe some of the conclusions here is that there is no such thing as 100% clean acquisition channel. They all have, unfortunately, a degree of invalidity. Some of them completely unacceptable, that's for sure, and that require immediate action. One of the key factors that we see that creates invalid traffic and ad fraud is the more actors that are in the advertising value chain we saw before, and the more indirect models we put in place. So, for instance, when we have a media partner that has a media partner, which has another media partner, etc., this basically creates very a lack of transparency that is perfect for ad fraud. And then, we see both paid social is among the channels with least invalid traffic, but we've seen a surge with new channels like TikTok in late 2022 which had provided enormous amounts of invalid traffic. And then finally, SEM also provides strong financial impact. So that's a high level. I don't know if anything is interesting.
SEM is social. No.
SEM is for search engine marketing. That would be Google
search engine
marketing.
Okay, thanks.
Microsoft search. So basically anything that has to do with inputting keywords when we search on, for instance, Google, and then it brings out a sponsored keywords,
right?
Sponsored results. That would be SEM. We've gotten so used to it that we don't see those sponsored results anymore, but they're actually a huge and a very effective advertising lever when we take into account that there might be some invalid traffic in that. Are there any that are interesting or that maybe drive some interest by anyone in the audience here?
So your question, Eduardo, any of these in particular you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, just to say that we've got Catherine here too, so from the messaging side of things, and I'm more from the messaging world myself, and this is all fairly new to me in the past year with content and advertising. But I totally agree. The more people you have involved in the chain, then there is a direct correlation with more fraud. That's obvious. And certainly I'm seeing on the payments side of thing within the payments group, you've got mobile operators, and when it comes subscriptions is what's growing the content world, and intelligent bundling of subscriptions by mobile operators, for example, who have a very trusted position in the marketplace generally. So MTN in Africa is the most trusted brand across the whole of Africa. So if they get content directly and work directly with the content providers and link up, there are less people in the chain. But is that really where we want to go? Because that just leads to a handful of the big players having such a huge market share. And where does someone, if us here on the call wanted suddenly to say, right, we're going to create some content, we're going to sell it around the world, let's go to the mobile operator, they probably wouldn't know who we are. And how do we get in there in the first place if you're smaller? So it's the trust, it just destroys trust, and it doesn't encourage people to try new things because that's very risky. And this is where the likes, we've got Melissa here from Aegis, who go around verifying companies, and they can verify the identity of new entities as well with a thorough in-depth verification as well comes in, I suppose, as well. Because okay, so just an observation. Thank you.
Could you drill down a little bit on native? That also seems to be a pretty high fraud rate. What's causing native to be that high?
Native together with programmatic and affiliation, they're basically indirect types of advertising where the publisher is very far away from the advertiser. So it means that the one putting in the ad, the brand that wants to advertise, it doesn't really know who the publisher who ends up serving the ad to the audience. They don't know who that publisher is. So this is what we meant by this second point here, that the more actors that are involved, and this is the case of programmatic, affiliation, and native, because there are many actors, there's several networks in between the advertiser and the end publisher. That's where there is more risk of invalid traffic. If that makes sense, Surinder?
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Thank you.
So I see we have 5 minutes left, James. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether I should go to a, let's say, more of a conclusion slide and wrap it up and maybe leave it up for any Q&A.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Okay.
Check the time. Yeah. Wow. Time really ran with us at this one. You're right. Just 5-2. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the key takeaways from today is that, first of all, Adford has many different phases, and that was the starting point of our conversation today. So I'm very happy to see it also here. Many different phases, takes many different stages of the funnel, and hits very different types of organizations. It's also a huge problem and impacts the advertising metrics. So we know from a common public perspective, we only know about the very relevant, well-known cases of brands, but it impacts every single organization, and we need to, audit. We need to understand what's happening behind the curtains of our advertising spend, and it does affect the entire funnel. And what's most problematic is that it creates, it stops trust, which is what you were saying, James. It stops trust in the digital advertising value chain.
Yeah, I know we're close to close, but one thing I've never understood with digital advertising, hundreds of billions are spent a year on it. Yet we had a speaker from WhatsApp at an event in London at the end of November last year. And I just went online and looked, okay, from Meta's revenue, because I'm thinking WhatsApp is really big and WhatsApp business messaging is big in India and other countries around the world. But Meta, 98% of their revenue comes from this digital advertising. But you look at the conversion rates of digital ads and compared to SMS, never mind compared to what Catherine and Surinder and other people on this call deal with on a daily basis, richer messaging channels, it's so low on digital advertising and with such a huge fraud risk as well. So 120 billion is about 25% of the whole digital ads spend globally. Then you're thinking, wow, there's a huge opportunity for messaging as a messaging fanboy. But yeah, it's just a weird one. People just love it and they go for it. And I think, well, not I think, I know why. It's because it's made so easy. Any organization of any size can so easily go to the likes of Meta and start putting into Facebook ads and start doing it super easily. And that is what the digital advertising industry has done so well compared to messaging. And I think that's why it's grown massively. But as a result, here we go with that fraud, which is over twice the whole value of business to consumer SMS every year. Yeah, amazing figure. I didn't know it was that high. I had no idea.
Actually, James, the actual estimate will depend a lot on which source you're looking at, but it's in any case either that or half of that or 1.5 times the 120 billion. So in any case, very, very, very
it's
high.
A lot. It's very, very high.
So actually, digital advertising is expected to grow by double digit in the next 5 years. So it's still expected to grow a lot. But as you're saying, it's posing some challenges for some of the advertisers to actually generate the right conversion rates and find the right way to do it. One of the key explanations on why it has such low conversion rates is actually invalid traffic, which is in between 10 to 20% of invalid traffic lurking in those campaigns. Good news, just to close it off for today, is early signs can be very easily identified. So there are typical signs that our clients and prospects experience and solutions are available. So it's a huge problem, but it's solvable. And yeah, I think that wraps it up for me today. I hope you had an interesting session, and happy to answer maybe a couple of questions if there's any.
Yeah, the first thing is, could you send that presentation to me? Are you fine making it available? Because we'd love to upload that presentation along with the recording of this session onto our website for members. That would be great. And we'll probably unleash Beatrice on you, because I know Ross has been talking to you already. It would be fantastic to have your brand within the MEF community officially at some point as well. Yes. That's what I could say. And you'd certainly find a very, very good home here. And we've got some nice events coming up. Indeed, Beatrice has helped put together one in Italy on May the 9th as well. I ran one in Malaysia in January. Beatrice, we've got 1 minute. Go for it. Say
Hello.
hi.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Eduardo, for the presentation. Yes, we are organizing this event in Rome. It's a one-day event. It's a leadership forum. In the morning, we will have a focus on the Italian market and digital transformation. And then after lunch, we will have international sessions, more focusing on content and services with international audience in English. And after that, yes, the amazing rooftop you show, James. We will have a drink gathering all together on the rooftop. Yeah, exactly. With an amazing view, and we can have a moment of networking all together. So fantastic. If you want to come, the registrations are open on the website, so you can register, and we'll wait for you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. And everyone, thank you. I think that's it for today. A very, very quick point. It's going to be back in the capable hands of Ross and Narayan next month, because I will be on my travels returning from ITW in the US. So I will be on a plane at that time and unable to join you. But thank you to all of you to join. Eduardo, lovely seeing you. Great presentation. And we've opened the door to ad fraud in this group. So let's kick it wide open and let's go for it and discuss ad fraud and see what we can do and combine, because we've really launched that with the fraud and revenue assurance working group within MEF. We've got a trusted messaging group within MEF, and we need to bring that to why not call it trusted advertising group within MEF as well. So a subgroup of this focusing specifically on ad fraud, and that links totally with what we're doing within DCB, Louise, as well, with direct carrier billing. So yeah, perfect. Thank you all. Don't want to take up your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Surinder. Thank you all. Thanks, Catherine. Bye.